All right, guys. So Mayor Lori Lightfoot of Chicago made a big announcement the other day. Okay, she made a big announcement. She basically announced that she was lighting almost $10 million on fire in order to fight racism in Chicago. Take a look.
Joining other cities across the country, Mayor Lightfoot declaring racism as a public health crisis in Chicago.
When we think about racism, many of us think about its visible and audible forms. But the reality is the insidious nature of systemic racism has other impacts that are every bit as deep and harmful.
The Chicago Department of Public Health is allocating $9.6 million in COVID-19 relief funding from the CDC to establish 6 health equity zones covering the entire city. The zones will be led by regional and community organizations. Their primary focus for now will be battling COVID-19.
But as we continue to recover from the pandemic, these coalitions will also lead hyperlocal strategies to confront the root factors: healthcare and social service access, food access, housing conditions, community safety.
The announcement comes just 2 days after the city's health department released a report on the health of Black residents. The report revealed a growing life expectancy gap between Black and non-Black residents, more than 9 years.
It is so frustrating to see patients come to me and the system has failed them.
Dr. Melissa Simon is the director of the Center of Health Equity Transformation at Northwestern. She says it's important to acknowledge racism in health outcomes.
It is very helpful when our leaders declare that we are going to address root causes.
Mayor Lightfoot says the city is going to continue to tackle anti-racist policies with a focus on transforming systems and adopting racial equity tools and strategies.
Oh man, guys, the reason why I said she's lighting $10 million on fire, because that's literally what she's doing. Okay, this type of stuff really never surprises me from these liberal cities. Okay, because they love wasting money. They love having the government throw money at a problem in the name of quote unquote racism, when racism is not the problem in Chicago. The problem in Chicago is crime. It is gangs. It is murders. It is criminals, which really all is a function of a lack of fathers, right? Strong men in the communities, culture, and poverty. That's the problem, right? You want to know why Black people are not expected to live as long as white people? It's because if you're Black, you much more likely to be caught up in a gang shooting or to be murdered, right? That's why, okay? It's not because there's some disparities in public health going on in Chicago that, for whatever reason is affecting, Black Chicagoans, right? The evil white man is holding them down, right? This is a city that's almost 30% Black. Okay. And in the South side, it's like 80, 90% Black, mostly Black people. So again, this stuff really, it just irks my nerves because you're really just wasting taxpayer dollars. But again, this is par for the course with liberals. And I'm glad that a Chicago Alderman, as one of them, is saying that gangs are responsible for Chicago's problems, not racism, as Mayor Lori Lightfoot claimed. Okay, he's basically calling BS on what Lori Lightfoot is talking about. Let's read here. A Chicago city official heavily criticized Democratic Mayor Lori Lightfoot's claim that racism was to blame for the challenges facing the city, declaring it a, quote, public health crisis. Again, public health crisis, right? This is the same excuse they used in the middle of the pandemic, right? Where everybody was locked down, where, anytime Trump did anything, super spreader event, they said, oh, no. But these people that want to protest and ride in the streets in the name of social justice, they can do that because police brutality is a public health crisis, right? So now, it's moved on from police brutality being a public health crisis. Now it's racism, okay? Just more excuses for progressive priorities. That's all it is. Lightfoot on Thursday blamed systemic racism for the hardships minorities residents face in the city, pledging to use millions of dollars in grants from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention for combating alleged systemic racism, which she called a public health crisis. Quote, when you think about racism, many of us think about it in visible and audible forms, but the reality is the insidious nature of systemic racism has other impacts that are every bit as deep and harmful, but often ones that we can't see, like the impact on the psyche and other impacts on our bodies that are just as, if not more deadly, Lightfoot said, as the Daily Wire previously reported. Oh, yeah, well, I wonder how, violent murders impact people's psyches, right? Like gang violence. I wonder how that impacts people's psyches. I bet people worry about that more than so-called public health disparities. But anyways, Alderman Raymond Lopez of Chicago's 15th Ward, however, says gang violence is to blame for the problems faced by minority residents. Quote, generational gang life isn't just something that's encouraged, it's almost revered in some neighborhoods, Lopez told the Washington Examiner. If you really want to get to what is the heart of a lot of this, it is gangs, and it is the borderline collapse of the family unit in many of our neighborhoods. Lightfoot has avoided calling out gangs in our community as a source of violence in our city. Amen, right? Gang violence, and probably the root of why gang violence exists is because of the collapse of the nuclear family, the family unit, right? To avoid young men getting caught up in gang life, they need strong fathers who are going to keep them in check, to keep them from getting in gang life, okay? That's what you need, right? But see, the Democrats, they don't want to talk about that, right? Don't talk about that. That might actually solve the problem. That might actually lead to solutions. Let's not do that. We got to keep spending government money, right? Burning $10 million on fire to set up public health, checkpoints, wards, whatever you want to call them, right? Whatever you want to call them. You got to set those things up, okay? You can't actually really solve the root problem. Lopez told the outlets that residents in the ward he represents are giving up on calling the police, as it seemed that more focused on systemic racism now than combating gang violence. He added that kids as young as 4th or 5th grade are involved in gang life, accusing schools of taking a hugs and kisses approach to dealing with students who are involved in gangs. Schools aren't informing the police about gang affiliation and allowing the criminal justice system to become part of the solution, Lopez said. Yet Mayor Lightfoot has made it harder for police in Chicago to do their jobs, including her recent policy change that discourages police officers from chasing a suspect who has been accused of a low-level offense lower than a Class A misdemeanor unless the suspect poses a obvious threat to the community or any person. These policies allow low-level offenders to get away with crime, potentially working their way up to bigger crimes until they eventually get caught at the expense of innocent victims. This was ignored by Lightfoot last week when she claimed at almost every single point in our city's history, sadly, racism has taken a devastating toll on the health and well-being of our residents of color, and particularly those who are black. Lopez disagreed with that sentiment as it applies to Chicago's problems. You know what it is? Lightfoot doesn't have the cojones to call out the gangs because honestly, she's probably afraid, right? She's probably afraid, and I don't blame her for that. But if you're really going to have somebody solve the issue, you have to call out the problem for what it is. And that's what you really need in leadership. You need somebody that's not afraid to take on the gangs, to say, you know what, we locking y'all up, right? I'm getting way off in this video, right? But we locking y'all up, right? We locking you up. We're cracking down on the gangs. We're getting the criminals off the street. And that calls for the opposite of what the Democrats call for. That calls for increasing more resources for the police, putting police on every single block, right? Until all the criminals are off the streets. But the progressives, they call that racist, even though you're protecting the people in the community, right? But that's racist, according to them, right? It's racist. Quote, I think it's a fool to avoid having to deal with gang and other issues, period. 200 plus murders in the city of Chicago. None of them were committed because of racism, he told the Examiner. I can tell you last week's gang shooting had nothing to do with racism. The shooting in Inglewood Monday morning, 4 people shot, 3 others injured, was not about racism. You're right. And it reminds me of how, Joe Biden and the Democrats keep coming out here and saying that white supremacy is the biggest threat to this country when, you're not seeing mass white supremacist violence. Most of the violence in this country is not committed by white supremacists or in the name of racism. But yet they keep telling us that's the problem. And Democrats love doing this trick. They love the trick of trying to tell us that what our eyes are saying, we shouldn't believe that. Don't believe that. It's something else. It's the system, right? It's not what you see. It's not the hooligans and the thugs and the criminals that are in the streets that are killing innocent people, right? That are causing destruction, that are selling drugs. No, it's not them. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. It's racism. They're doing it because the system's racist, right? That's what they're saying. Okay. And listen, here's the thing, man. Like the way I look at it is like this. You have to have a strong police presence, right? Also, citizens have to be able to protect themselves, right? Chicago has notoriously strict gun laws that don't work because criminals are able to get all the guns, and it's harder for residents to get guns, right, to protect themselves. They need to be able to protect themselves. And then, once you have citizens that are able to protect themselves and you have a proper police presence, okay, you have a strong police presence in the communities, then you can invest in those communities. You can invest in the young children in those communities and help them get opportunity and to get jobs and to bring businesses into that community that are going to help break the cycle of poverty that does contribute to the violence, right? But again, you have to make sure the neighborhoods are actually safe for commerce first before you can invest in those communities. That's my problem with the defund the police argument. They try to say, well, conservatives don't understand defund the police. We just want to take resources from the police and put them in the community so that, violence doesn't happen in the first place. So you don't need the police at all. And it's not like I disagree with the liberals in regards to the role of poverty and crime. I don't disagree with that. I think poverty does cause crime, right? I think poverty contributes. But what contributes to poverty? Well, not having two-parent households, right? Having a single income in the household. When you have two incomes, you're much less likely to live in poverty, right? So that's a part of it, right? So if you solve that issue, which really is not a government issue, that's not an issue for the government to solve. That's actually a culture issue, right? That's a cultural issue. And you make sure the neighborhoods are actually safe. You make sure it's safe to actually participate in commerce in the neighborhoods. Then you can have more business coming to the neighborhoods. And then you can also, if you invest in the education of those kids, maybe they can get jobs. Maybe they can grow up and be productive members of society. Maybe they're not as attracted to gang life because they have other alternatives. But that requires, one, promoting the nuclear family, and two, protecting the communities, right? Getting the gang members off the street, getting the bad apples off the street. That's what it requires. So, listen, this city of Chicago, people call for Lori Lightfoot to resign because of her comments or her, discriminating against white journalists. Listen, I think that's bad that she's discriminating against white journalists. But I think that if the Republicans were smart, they really should call for her to be fired over her mishandling of what's going on in Chicago when it comes to violence, right? That's what they really should be calling for. Hey, you know what? You're just doing a bad job at mayor. You're taking money to fight racism instead of be fighting these gangs. You really should be fired from that, right? That's what you should be fired for. That's an actual fireable offense, right? So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.